Hello. So for me, it was for sure the best chicken I ever had. So I just want to make that clear. And because we're coming after lunch and we had power outages, let me start off with a joke. So a guy is sitting, smoking in his living room, and his wife comes to him angry, like, hey, what are you doing? She got nervous because of the smoke. Don't you know how bad smoking is for you? And she takes his pack of cigarettes and tells it, look what it says. The guy takes the pack and starts reading. Warning, smoking can cause cancer. Warning, smoking can cause death. And then he smiles, looks at his wife and says, honey, I'm a React developer. I don't care about warnings. We only care about errors, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. So, production issues, outages, downtime, all of these that affect us every day. And what's the leading cause of this? Well, most often than not, it's actually bugs. And these little rascals come in various colors, various sizes, and if you are a fan of Looney Tunes and Space Jam, my favorite movie, you know how big they can actually get once they get inside of something and get that secret sauce that they need. But who here knows why they are even called bugs? Can you raise your hand? Nice. So personally, I always believe they're called bugs because, you know, they're scary and gross. But then I thought, hey, why don't they're called snakes? Snakes are super scary, deadly, and very, very gross. Or something really scary like clowns. But the reason is actually that in 1947 at Harvard University, a team of computer scientists saw that their computer, a big, very, very big computer at the time, was not performing correctly. It constantly gave random errors. And they tried to figure out what was wrong with the software, with the firmware, and eventually they started breaking the computer apart, and inside they found a moth which was stuck to a part of the electric circuit. And this became eventually part of the lore, and it became famous by Dr. Grace Hopper, who invented COBOL, and now it's stuck. We all consider bugs as the issues that happen to developers. But personally, I don't find bugs that scary, so that's why I like to call them Bugs Bunny. Because think about it, Bugs Bunny never gave up, so he always outwitted Elmer Fudd or Daffy Duck and found a way to get what he wanted. You know, he changed duck season to rabbit season to duck season and found a way to make Elmer Fudd shoot himself in the face. And it's the same with bugs. So no matter how much you try, how much QA you put, automatic tests, test coverage 100%, there will always be a clever, determined Bugs Bunny who tunnels his way into your application. Bugs Bunny is inevitable. That's why it's our job as engineers to be prepared, like to learn from him and learn from his previous attempts and make sure he does not get into your carrot farm and eat as many carrots as he wants. So that's why I'm here today, to talk to you about all my past mistakes where Bugs Bunny outwitted me and made me shoot myself in the face and caused havoc in my life. No, most of these events were sad and frustrating at the time, but I learned from them, and now I can look back with joy and fond memories. Now, each of these problems had a solution in hindsight, and by sharing these stories, I hope you learn from my past mistakes. So before we start, a little bit about myself. My name is Neciu. I have been working as a front-end engineer for about 13 years professionally, also in college. I'm currently a co-founder and staff engineer at CareerOS, software for EdTech. I previously worked in advertising for companies like Coca-Cola, like Peugeot, McDonald's. And before that, I worked at an e-commerce startup in New York, which was acquired by Victoria's Secret for $400 million. And lastly, before my current role, I work at a delivery food service very similar to DoorDash called Glovo in Barcelona. And that's where I live right now in beautiful sunny Barcelona. And way, way, way back before I became a software engineer during college, I worked as a QA for Electronic Arts. I actually worked on two really cool games, Need for Speed Underground and Football Manager 2000-something. And it was a really cool experience to see the frustration that you have when an app breaks. So with my history on working on different types of products, from e-commerce to food delivery, and now in edtech, and different scales, like I serve software to tens of hundreds of millions of users, I can say that I'm very familiar with bugs and how frustrating it is to build and ship and have everything break randomly. So let's start with my first story. When I was a junior developer, a total programming noob, I just came out of college. I only knew basically data structures, algorithms, sorts, that sort of thing that were completely useless to me as a web developer. So I started in a very small company making small games. And if you enjoy Courtney's talk about gamification, we started building these games for children, like a point-and-click game in the browser. This helped children learn about the benefits of milk. So in Romania, we had this program where every child received milk in their school days until they reach elementary school. So this campaign, sponsored by a big corporation that made the milk, was supposed to teach children what the benefits of milk are. Now, the game itself was very straightforward, even for elementary school children, 7, 8 years old. You had 3 mini games, and you had these cows or students, and some things pop up, and all they had to do was point their mouse and click if it's like hay, that's correct. If it's milk, it's not correct, and you get points. And because it was gamification, you had a streak going if you hit correctly 3 or 4 times. Now, outside of these mini games, you also had a general leaderboard, so the children can see who was in the top 20 and with what score, so they can try to beat it. Now, this had absolutely no prizes, so it was just for fun. And the one thing I didn't count on was how driven 7-year-olds would be to just appear in that leaderboard. And this is what before we knew stuff about gamification, like Duolingo, habits, and all the fancy stuff we know today to create user engagement. Back then, we just did the leaderboard for fun. So we tested the game for months, our company tested it, the client tested it, and we did user testing as well. But then after a week of being in production, we came back with scores like this, in the billions. And our first thought was they cheated. Obviously, we thought that because before we built another game for adults, and they cheated a lot, because there was a prize involved. But here, we didn't think, and our first instinct was, of course, they cheated. We immediately banned all those scores in the billions, and everything went back to normal. And this went for a week, 2 weeks. We started working on a different project, and then we started getting calls from the media, from the client, because apparently, while we banned the people, we got calls that 20 children that we banned started crying in their school, started getting really sad. And what did they do when they start crying? They tell their parents. And the parents got very, very mad, because if there's one thing more scarier than an upset mother, it's 20 upset mothers. So they band together, went to Facebook, started calling our client, the sponsor. Then they reached us. And obviously, we found out that how this happened. So one child figured out a bug in the system, that if he clicked start, got a streak going, click pause, and then just did start, pause, start, pause, start, pause, start, pause, the score would double. So he figured this out, and the first thing he did was tell his friends. And now his friends knew the trick. They started outdoing each other, who could get the highest on the top of the leaderboard. So we assumed they were cheating, but they were actually gaming the gaming system. And once I found the bug, we fixed it. It was actually one line of code that made this mistake. This was written in Laravel, so we can safely say that PHP can make young children cry, not just grown men. So honestly, it was all PHP faults. But in the end, we fixed it. We apologized. We restored their accounts in the top 20, but with smaller scores. And we let the friendly competition continue. Now, what did I learn from this? Every game needs to be tested for potential breaking points, then stress tested, and then throw a hammer at it to make sure everything is working correctly. We could have prevented this easily if we had an alert system that looked for anomalies in the score, but we didn't. And finally, don't make rash decisions with your user accounts, especially to children. Now, the next part still gives me nightmares to this day. So it's a story that's pretty popular nowadays. I usually pride myself in not having like push notifications on my phone. I keep them for really important stuff like pager duties, some Slack channels. But one morning I was woken up by a push notification from my bank. And the message said, someone tried to take 50K out of your account, but we blocked it. It was 7 in the morning. I said, that's good, went back to sleep. And in my half-sleeping haze, I realized, who's stupid enough to try to take $50,000 in one charge? Who thinks that I have that amount of money, first thing, in an account? And then why not try 500 or 1,000? Just get a little by little. So then I realized, oh no, this could be a real charge. I jumped, got my phone, and of course, the company that tried to charge me was Google. I wished it wasn't, but then I was horrified. I went white, put down my phone. My mind was already working through solutions, and what do I have to do now? Like, because I've heard a lot of stories about this happening where you get a really big bill. So it was, back then, it happened to Firebase. There's actually a Netlify case where someone got a 104K bill for a simple static site. The Firebase case was really popular 7 years ago. This is what I knew. Recently, Gergely found the issue with the portfolio website called Kara, which was for designers to build their portfolio, and it was built using serverless. And because it got really, really viral and popular, they got like 100K per day for their traffic. So of course, I was horrified. I realized that I had to do some stuff. So I had some stuff to do. First, see what resources I had in Google to shut them down, because obviously I was bleeding money. Discover the issue that was happening and shut down that service. And finally, move into the woods, because I was never going to pay Google $50,000. But then, while I was looking through all my services and trying to see, because I had different projects, different Firebase accounts, different cloud runs, different virtual machines, but none of them had a spike in traffic, none of them have a spike in billing. So I didn't know what happened. The bill was clearly there that I owe $50,000, but I didn't understand from what. And I started talking to their customer support, and finally, I got directed to the issue at hand, which is the company that I worked on choose my billing account for their cloud infrastructure by mistake. And obviously, when I found out, my first reaction was this: praise the Lord. This was the biggest relief in my lifetime, because I never felt heaviness lift from my shoulders, like it happened like that. Afterwards, while they cleared the bill and my company paid it, which was a legit cost, I got ready to use the 300 free credit again from Google. Now, with the problem solved, I had to do something about it. So I started putting limits in place. So every time a cost will go above $20 or $50, it will shut down the project. And of course, this is easy in Google Cloud, but it's not so easy in third-party services like Netlify. I don't know if Vercel can do it. But the most important part is to always monitor traffic and have a firewall in place so you don't get DDoSed by bots, and that will hike up your traffic. Now, another example of this actually happened on my current job, which is kind of funny because we're using React, and while moving through different pages, I was doing this. So I had a use effect when that page got started, this was like in the root file, so track page viewed. And we refactored the login infrastructure, and a user was already logged in, but his session expired, and because we changed something in the login flow, he got stuck in an infinite loop for 5 minutes, which this in turn called this use effect 1 million times. Wow. And then our analytics cost spiked. We got billed for $15,000. But naturally, we raised to their support that, hey, it was a bug, and they were very understanding and said, okay, we're going to delete this cost, which is fine. But it explains why you shouldn't do stuff like this in production, especially the track event. You should have a system in place that doesn't send trackings to your third-party software in the same second, millions of events. So finally, we never have limits in place, never have events or calls that trigger on page load, and limit analytics for 1 event per second. Now that we got the scary stuff out of the way, let's talk a little bit about the fluff, namely CSS. CSS, of course, is as powerful as a programming language nowadays. So let's see what mistakes I did with CSS. So if you're a designer or a front-end developer, we work with buttons. So we decided at my previous company, let's make the page more interactive, make the page feel more alive. So what we did is, when something is loading, we just added a small loading icon there instead of the arrow icon. What we didn't count on are the checkout form. So in the checkout form, we had the system where you choose your payment method. And because the checkout form was not built using a two-way data binding reactive framework, it was built with something native that was 12 years old or something like that. It applied the loading state to the button, but it never took it off. So users, when changing the payment method, would see the loading forever. And they didn't, obviously the button still worked because it wasn't disabled, but the human nature is, if you see something that's loading, you don't click on it. But some did, and some didn't, which in turn made this problem very, very hard to find. Because the revenue didn't go down instantly. Because the problem was only when you change the payment method, and only then maybe you don't click on the button because you see it's loading. So it took us actually 3 months to see this problem while we observed the quarterly reports, and we realized, okay, something in the checkout is wrong, and then we looked in deeper, and we saw that the events of going to checkout were normal compared to the previous 3 months, but the checkout order completed was not, and then we finally found the use case. So what I learned from this is that simple is always better in critical parts of the application. There's a reason Amazon checkout looks like it was built in the 80s. We didn't have this at the time, but visual tests are the hot new thing, and this could have easily been solved with something like a visual test in Storybook. And the most critical part of the application, you should have monitors that look at data from checkout completed, checkout finished, and stuff like that. So you know that saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. So this entire situation happened again. So we built, again, we were working on a web performance improvement in the food delivery, and we were working on the forms and the checkout form and removing some third-party styling. Now, of course, I didn't break it this time, my colleague did, but he was talking during daily about what he plans to do, and he said, oh, I'm gonna change some styling in the select form. And of course, my mind would have instantly gone to, wait, that's not a good thing to do because I suffer the same problem. But it was during the pandemic, and I was not listening at all during dailies. I was doing something else. So we released it, and just like before, it affected a small portion of our users, only this time they couldn't actually select anything in the checkout. And we had a lot of new users, and they couldn't place an order, and we got alerted immediately. So this only happened for 20 minutes. But of course, we had to go through the process. And this was me, the team breaking production and me working on something else. So we reverted, and then we had to write a post-mortem about it. And while I was not personally involved, it was still a team blunder, and yeah. So what I learned from this is to obviously pay attention in daily. Then have this got saved because we did have alerts on checkout events this time. So we got notified in 5 minutes. It took 10 minutes to revert everything, but we didn't lose that much money. And then I found out the true value of writing a post-mortem after an incident. This is a document you write with your team to make sure what happened won't happen again. And you take learnings from it, and you create tasks and stuff like that. So finally, I'm going to reach a section that everyone dreads, which is refactoring. So every time we have to do it, something goes wrong. Like we work for months to make something better, to clean some technical debt, and then we end up with something like this, where 60% of the time it works every time. This should be like the general motto for software engineers everywhere. So joking aside, there are a lot of places I will never go to refactor, like checkout, sign-ups, authentication. You know the saying, why fix it if it ain't broke? But I'm not going to talk about authentication. Come find me after the talk. I have a really spicy authentication story. But my final story of the day, I saved the best for last. So this was happening at the food delivery company. We were using PagerDuty to get alerts when something went wrong. We had an on-call system. So during lunch one day, we were all sitting at the table. It was a really big cafeteria, like big as this room. And then my phone started getting PagerDuty alerts. I looked at it, and it was said that we were under attack by bots. Now, this happened quite often, to be truthfully. We were like a really big company, very famous, and people tried to scam us, basically. Promo codes, they tried to create fake users, stuff like that. I don't know why. But anyway, this was a normal thing. It happened every day. So when I saw it, I just muted the alarm, went back to my food. But then I started hearing everyone's PagerDuty go off in the cafeteria. So it went like, and whoa. Then mine went off again. I rushed to my laptop, joined a Slack huddle with 50 other people, staff engineers, principal engineers, everyone from infrastructure, security. Because eventually, what happened is the bots, which we thought were the bots, managed to take down our entire app and system. We had like 200 microservices or something like that. So we got into this meeting, and we didn't know what was happening. It took us like 30, 40 minutes to find out who the hacker was. And once we finally reached the solution, it was actually us. We did it to ourselves. So what happened was someone pushed a front-end deploy, which in a middleware created a redirection loop. So you were supposed to go to a restaurant, and when you click the restaurant button, it moved you to 10 other pages before you reached the restaurant button in a split second. So as a user, you couldn't see it. It went like, and then bam, you're at the end. But this created 10 extra paged requests, which in turn created 100 more requests to the API. And the API, we had at the time Amazon a firewall. And the Amazon firewall said, wait a minute, this person is making too much requests to our system, this person being our front-end application. And it decided, okay, let's shut this down. And then it shut down the front-end application, which in turn started a chain reaction that shut down multiple services until eventually the whole cluster went down. So the problem of recursion. So what I learned, don't attack your own app. That is pretty bad. This problem also bypassed our end-to-end systems because we were doing a pattern which is called page object model for end-to-end tests, which basically you just test one page and make sure the test is successful when it reaches the next page, and that's it. But because our bug was actually you reached the end result, but you took like a detour along the way, never got caught by the end-to-end team. And yes, there you have it. 5 stories of failure that happened in my life. So we learned how to make children cry and get away with it, how to get away with a 50K bill from Google, how to style your CSS buttons so users don't click on them, how to remove CSS from your payment forms, and how to bring down your app with extra requests. Now, in all seriousness, I did learn a lot, so empathize with your users, the importance of having alerts in place for scoring or anything that's out of the ordinary. Always prepare for the worst case scenario and have limits in place so you don't go bankrupt. Every failure needs to be critically analyzed and write a post-mortem document to find out what the root cause was, how we can prevent it, and how can we make sure it never happens again. And finally, it will pass. You might think it's the end of the world if you bring down production or delete the production database by mistake. In the end, we'll get over it, and we'll learn to not be mortal enemies with Bugs Bunny, but appreciate him for making our apps stronger and better at every turn. So, thank you.